I'm super excited for this. Thank you so much for making time for it.
I'm glad we finally got to do it.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, she knows I don't like interviews.
Okay.
So yeah. I don't. If it were up to me, I would not do a single interview.
Really?
Yeah, but I think with you, when you made the request, I was like, I think I've always thought if you ever ask, I'll say yes. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Can we get this on camera? Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah. And that's based off of just, your work, what I see on the socials, the kind of message you drive. I think it's so important for entrepreneurs, especially those who are still starting out, or who feel like the startup phase is never ending, for them to be able to see somebody who relates to them, and they can relate to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I think you also do the same, where it's like you're finding really good messages across the internet that are important in the context that South Africans build in.
Yeah.
And you share them so well.
Well, for me, I share everything that speaks to me. So if somebody else receives it, that's great. But for the most part, it's because I'm looking either for that inspiration or for that reason or for that reminder. So that's essentially why I share what I share.
Yeah, sure. You never think of a CEO of a major broadcaster needing motivation. People forget that. Like, oh no.
I think people do forget that. I wouldn't say I'm constantly in need of motivation, but I think there are times when you feel so bogged down that you forget who you are or what you're capable of or the reason why you do what you do. And so that's when I guess it's good for you to be able to seek out motivation. And sometimes it's through the people around you. Sometimes it's maybe looking back at where you were 6-7 years ago, whether it's through a photograph, video footage, or whatever it is, to be able to just get that small reminder of you've come far. And so I think for me, that's what it is. It's just we sometimes forget, but that's because we're in this race every single day to build, to do more, to be better. And that's why you do need to find outlets of motivation as much as you possibly can.
Sure. So looking back at this journey, right? You've been in radio, TV, and now running a major media group. What are the things that you've learned about yourself in these different parts of the journey that you've been through?
I think a key theme of my journey is definitely resilience. Being certain firstly about what I wanted to do. And I think I was always sure. How it went naturally with any journey, there'll be ups and downs. I always describe my journey as tumultuous, and not because it's been so difficult only. There have been really good parts. But I think having started in radio gave me, a deep understanding of storytelling, essentially, in a compelling way, understanding audience engagement, and then you transition into television. Television provided me, with the ability to be able to communicate visually, which is very important. And I think by the time I got to a point of having the opportunity to be able to now build a media and a broadcast business, I had all of those lessons that I'd accumulated over the years to be able to utilize that in the business that I'm in right now.
Sure. When you think about how differently, TV works versus radio, versus now the Internet of Things.
Yeah.
How differently do you think about these mediums and how you need to be able to communicate across and create things that can really help people? You're speaking about communicating visually, and maybe radio and the way you communicate there is very different as well.
Yeah.
How do you contextualize those differences in mediums and how the story gets told?
I think the common denominator here is storytelling, right? And I've always said that the best people on television are individuals who started on radio, because you learn a lot by being able to communicate, tell a story without anybody seeing your facial expressions, seeing your face. They're literally only listening to you and how you narrate a story, the emotion behind it. And then onto television, there's a lot that goes into the back end, right? You would know, even at this scale, you would understand that television is now a bigger monster. And having been behind the scenes, because I was a writer and producer before I ever even went on air. And that made the biggest difference for me, because you learned the end-to-end workflow and the ecosystem of what it takes to put this thing together. So that by the time you are on air, if anything goes wrong, you know, you have a deeper understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. And I think to this day that aids me. I have a better understanding, I have more empathy, because I've been there, not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera as well. So I think even in telling the stories, you're constantly thinking about, how do I make this content compelling? Because you want eyeballs, right? But more than eyeballs, you want those eyeballs to stay on. Right? So you want that average time spent to really be meaningful and impactful, because that's how you measure success, particularly on television. And so it's about making that content compelling enough, engaging audiences and understanding what they want, because they are the customer at the end of the day. And so if you understand the preferences of the audience, and I think there's a common thread there with what audiences want. Yes, it'll differ in terms of genre, etc. But compelling content is compelling content. And as long as you understand that, you're able to create for any platform. That's my take.
Sure. Okay. You got me stuck there. There are some things that I wanted to pull out from that. How did you know you needed to make the switch from behind the scenes to on screen? And then, fast forwarding all those years from going off on screen and going on to becoming, building it as a business, as a media business versus being on screen.
The question of how did you know or when did you know is always so interesting to me. But I'll say this. When I was on radio, thinking about the transition into television, I wanted to be on air, and I was very clear about that. And when I got to the public broadcast at the time, they wouldn't put me on air because they said I looked too young to be on air and be a news anchor on air. So I was like, okay, what's available? And there was a producer position available. And I thought about it and I said, let me take it, because for me, I've never been afraid to learn. And that's been a key thread in my life. Let me learn as much as I can, because I know there'll be a time when this comes into use for me. And that's exactly what I did. So I learned as much as I can on the desk, and, diligently so. Because I always say, clarity is on the other side of persistence. At the end of the day, you have to persist. And that's exactly what I did. But I persisted in the position that I was given. And that was available to me. And then an opportunity came up where there was nobody to read the news on a particular day. And they said, we remembered that this is what you wanted to do. Are you available? And naturally, I was available. But all the lessons I'd learned at that time had prepared me for that moment, for that opportunity. And I took it on. And, essentially a few days later, I got my on-air contract, and I did double duty producing and on air for a while before I completely transitioned to just being on air. So I wouldn't say there was a moment where I said, okay, now I'm going to transition. I think the opportunities came up because I was always ready for them. And even with the business, people always assume that Rapid Innovation Group and Newzroom Afrika and all the businesses I own or I have founded now are my first businesses. They aren't. So while I was working at the public broadcaster, I already had a business. Yes, it was at a small scale, very much a one-woman show. And that was my first taste of entrepreneurship. Of course, it wasn't at the scale that I'm at now, but it taught me, the ins and outs. And it also showed me that this is what I truly want to do. So it's always been in me. But I think I needed to go through the different phases to be able to understand the space, because when it was time to start a fully fledged business, I started with what I know, which is broadcasting. And I think that's what's made the difference for me.
Yeah. You talk about those early days of testing out different small businesses and whether or not it was at the scale, right? I always think that entrepreneurs underestimate how important those early days are. Where you're trying something and you're building something, maybe it feels like play, doesn't feel exactly like, oh no, I am an entrepreneur. How important was that time where you were testing things with businesses that were not at the scale that you are at now? And are there things that you learned in those businesses that you carry even today? Because you're speaking about persistence and how important it is to just stay with that journey.
Yeah, so persistence and, again, resilience are some of the key things that I learned at that time. Also learning to create a vision for yourself. Yes, it won't be as bold as now when you bring in consultants and you're working over a couple of days at a strat breakaway. But essentially, in those early days, you're developing your own strategy. You're developing your own vision, your own mission, and saying, what is it that I want to achieve out of this business? And I think for me, those were the key things: believing in your own vision and being able to sell it. Because ultimately, that's what it is. That's what entrepreneurs are. Or that's one thing that you will have to be as an entrepreneur, is to be able to sell a vision, whatever that vision is. And I think those are the key things that I learned in the early days, but also learning that not everything that you sell will be bought. And that it is okay, but you need to fail fast. Another lesson to this day, I live by that. My team hears that all the time. I'm like, if we're going to fail, let's fail fast and move on. And so I would say those are the three key things that I learned in the beginning. It's persistence, it's resilience, and failing fast. Actually, and a fourth one is definitely being able to craft a vision and sell it.
Yeah, and it's back to the storytelling again.
Exactly.
What is key to styling a really good story when it comes to your business?
I think it's the vision. It is difficult, and even saying it is difficult for me, but in many ways, I am the business. And a big part of my role outside of being founder, being CEO, means that I take care of the business development. So every day I have to go out there and find new opportunities, sell the vision yet again. And so I think it's about having a really, really good story. And even though people may believe and assume that they know your story, only you can tell your story the way you know how. And I think it's been very important for me not to focus on what are the drawbacks, about being young, being Black, being a woman in this male-dominated sector. It's about saying, well, actually, one thing that I know is that I'm a game changer. I'm an innovator. I've been able to build platforms for other people as well, in different ways. And I think in the beginning, for me, when I thought, how do you bring people up or bring people along with you? It's like, is it now my job to make sure that other people get channels? Not necessarily. It's my job to do a good job so that it's easier for people like me to get more opportunities. But what I feel we've been able to do really well is to create opportunities for other entrepreneurs. There's so many entrepreneurs, SME owners, Black people, women in particular, that have their own businesses within our ecosystem. And I'm extremely proud of that. So for me, that's the, bringing people along, making sure that, as I go up the ladder, I'm taking someone with me. And that's been crucial. And I've got a true tried and tested sort of formula for that at this stage.
Yeah. One of the things that we've said is like really important for the people that come onto our platform is opportunity creators.
Yeah.
And the reason being, like, I think that if this country is going to change and the work that we're doing is going to matter, it needs to be able to drive impact. Have you always thought very consciously about the impact that you're driving and, sending the ladder back down, like you're mentioning?
100%. For me, if it's not impactful, I don't want to be involved in it. That's my take. And like I said, I've always thought about it. I didn't know how it's going to happen. And in many ways, it's happened organically, where at any point in time, if my team is presenting something, whether it's new partners, new suppliers, I'm like, where are the Black people? Where are the women? Where are the youth? So it's being very intentional about that. Yes, that's not the only part of my story, but it's definitely something that is important for me to constantly be mindful of, to make sure that as part of the vision, that's what we're driving. So it's definitely always top of mind for me. The impact is also comes through creating jobs, which we've been able to do. I mean, the business literally started with 2 employees. We're now at almost 500 people. That didn't happen miraculously. Do you know what I mean? We had to be intentional about it. Every single day we had to think about ways, how do we build a sustainable business, but make sure that we are creating those opportunities for employment, meaningful employment at that, and development too.
Sure. Talking about, opportunities, when the opportunity came to bid for a new channel with MultiChoice, you shared already about how you are uniquely positioned to take the advantage of being on air. What does it look like to take advantage of an opportunity like starting a completely new media group? Can you take us back to that, opportunity and what that looked like?
I think when the opportunity first came up, there were other bidders who had contacted me to be a part of their bids, but specifically on the talent side. And I had declined all of those offers. And then another conversation happened around actually, we can do this ourselves. And I can definitely participate in this as an entrepreneur, as an owner of the media, as opposed to being, part of another bid as talent. And that's exactly what I chose, to rather go in at an ownership level. It took a lot of boldness, I would say, and because everybody's looking at you, you're so young. I think at that time I was probably like 26 years old,
sure.
When making that decision. But it was an easy decision because, like I told you, I was already in the business space, yes, at a very small scale. But I was like, one thing that I do know and understand broadcasting end to end. I'm currently on air, as an anchor. I've produced. So I've done essentially all the work. And at that time it was for almost 10 years being whether in front, behind the camera. And so it was a no-brainer for me. And I think sometimes as people, because of whether it's self-doubt or naysayers, you'll be like, maybe I'm not ready, or I'm not good enough, or I'm too young. And I think it happens when you're constantly looking for advice and guidance and direction. It's important, yes, to have people in your life that can give you counsel, but it's also important to trust yourself. And I think at that time, I actually did not seek counsel from anybody. I just said, I'm going to participate in this. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, I'm good. And I think making that decision, very audacious decision, has fed me well in many ways, because the first person who bought into my vision and my vision for my life in particular is me. And every day, my biggest responsibility is to make that come to life.
Sure. I'm saying here a lot. But I think I'm just like,
a good
no, it's a very good year,
Okay.
because I think you hear stories about people having a massive opportunity presented to them and they self-doubt themselves out of it.
Yes.
Where it goes, oh no, I am not the person that
Yeah.
should be doing this.
Oh, I'm not good enough.
I am not good enough. I don't have the experience. I am way too young for this to be happening to me right now.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what it takes to have conviction in the direction in which you choose to take your life, but also your business?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think for me, it's twofold. So my biggest lesson on resilience in particular, which is, like I said, a thread I carry throughout my entire life, work, business, is something that I learned from my mom. I think she's the most resilient person that I know. And so that's within me. I truly believe that resilience is inherent. And then the second one is a spiritual one. It's very difficult for people, be it, if you're perceived to be a public figure or a business person or celebrated person, to speak about your spirituality, because, it can be taken in a way that you don't intend it.
Yeah.
But for me, I can openly say that everything that I do, and before I do anything, I pray about it. And I say, if this is the direction that my life needs to take, God will make it happen. Does that mean I still need to put in the work? Yes. Do I need to put in the effort? Yes. And so for me, that's where that conviction comes from. It comes from the fact that I know what I'm capable of, and I I don't need to be confused about that. And I don't doubt that. And like I said, sometimes it'll be the outside and all the noise trying to remove you from your purpose. But I've always been clear about what my purpose is. And my purpose is to make impact wherever I am, regardless of what I'm doing. I'll make an impact. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. So it's that conviction and resilience and persistence again. I said, it's very, very, very important to persist. And I think I always have. So no matter what I do, there's always that common thread, essentially.
So you guys take this massive leap after you presented this amazing opportunity. Before I ask this question, actually, how do you know that the partners that you've gotten are the right partners for you?
Partnerships are very, very difficult because you essentially have to align in so many ways. Align on values, have a common vision to achieve what it is you've set out to achieve. And I think for me, that's how I looked at it initially was, do we have a clear understanding of what the vision is and what we want to achieve? And there was definite alignment in that. And over the years, you essentially hold on to that. Even when you have disagreements, you go back to, do we still have the same vision? Is our vision common? And if it is, then you continue. But at the same time, we know of big businesses where essentially the partners maybe decide to go a different direction. It's usually just because they just want to go in a different direction. And I think we need to be okay with that. A lot of, founders and entrepreneurs always think about it as a boy band, girl band thing where people now have beef or so-called beef. And it's not like that. I think it's okay as entrepreneurs, we have different interests anyway. And it's okay for us to pivot into different things. And so for me, as long as there's a common vision and that base of values, like an alignment in values, then I feel like you're in the right direction in terms of selecting the right partners. But if you do get to a point where you say, actually, it's time for us to pivot, or there's an individual who needs to pivot, then you also need to do it, gracefully.
Yeah. What was the vision that you guys came to and said, okay, this is what the vision will be for Newzroom Afrika? And can you talk us through that first 5 months, from pitching to going live?
I think, first of all, between the channel itself, it took us about 5 months to get it up and running and to go live. And normally channels get about 3 years, right, from the time they sign the broadcast contract. So we didn't have much time to launch. But before that, I think we were clear that we wanted to create an innovative, groundbreaking platform that is essentially the voice of the people, which I believe we've truly achieved over the past 6 years. And so that was the clear path of where we wanted to go. Again, using this platform to tell, very compelling stories, engaging stories, and making sure that you really include your viewer in parts of your storytelling. And so that's essentially what we wanted to do in a nutshell. And it was about building the right team for us to be able to achieve that. And I think, we were very fortunate at that time that we were able to attract really great talent, both on air and off air, to be able to get us to launch and beyond that. And over the years, we've been able to create a platform that is sought after, that people want to be involved in, people want to work for. And that was always part of the goal.
How do you build an environment and a company that people want to work for? But also, what were you guys looking for in those early hires? I always think that the first 10, the first 20, the first 50 are going to define the culture for the next 500. Like where you guys are now is 500. How do you build and maintain a good culture as the company scales?
I think in the beginning, when we were thinking about who are the types of people that we would like to get on air, we wanted to get the best of the best, because you are launching and there is a lot against you. Because of the many other people that, were bidding for the same platform, there was a lot of negativity around us having been the ones who had gotten this. And so you needed to make sure that, you launch on a high.
That right. Yeah.
Yes. And so we wanted to get the best of the best. And a big part of that was telling the story. I was personally meeting people for coffees and dinners and saying, this is who I am. this is the vision. Do you want to come along with us? That's literally how the conversations were happening. And those were the types of people that we got in the beginning, people who truly just believed in, again, the story that I was selling, the story about the vision and what we want to achieve and what we want to build. And they wanted to be a part of that. I always say that the best thing about our business essentially is that it's founder run. So not only am I a founder, but I'm also a CEO, and that makes a difference because then I have my touch, not only strategically, but also operationally. And that's very important because even when things get lost in translation and when the people who you have entrusted with your vision are no longer aligned, you're able to catch it really quickly and take control. And I think sometimes founders let go too quickly. They build teams and they're like, it's time for me to move on to the next thing. I thought that also. I thought I'd just be in the business for about 2 years. And after that, I'd find someone to replace me as CEO. But it hasn't happened that way. I'm now at 7 years in the business with Newsroom having turned 6 now. And every time I think about when will be the right time, for me to move on, I haven't found that sweet spot yet because I still feel as a founder, there is still a lot for me to contribute in building that culture that we so desire.
I think that's so important, right? And as you go through this 7-year journey, what are the things that have changed for you in terms of the things that you're learning about yourself, not just as a business leader, but as a person?
One thing I'll be frank about is that my character has been tested many times.
I'm sure.
Over the past 7 years. However, I have built such a great business that I'm always just in awe of what we've been able to achieve. And that's what keeps me going. But it's also constant reflecting and being honest with yourself because there have been mistakes that I have made. There have been times when I look back and I think I could have done better in that situation. But that's the whole point, right? I'm learning. In as much as everybody else in the organization is learning on a daily basis, I too am learning. And I think it's about constantly having that constant reflection of, am I still on the right track? Am I doing the right things? Do I need additional support? And that's where making sure that you get the right people on board to be able to support because, we're essentially a corporate. And people always think, because it's media and journalism, it's very relaxed. Our business operates and runs like a corporate, which has been one of my key goals, to make sure that you've got the right people in the right positions, in the right departments, making sure that we run like a well-oiled machine. So that's been very important, making sure that we've got the processes, systems in place that the business can function in my absence. That's the ultimate goal, right? That's the ultimate goal, that as a founder, you need to be able to build something that can exist even when you're not there and that can function optimally even when you're not there. So for me, that's what I've had to learn. I've had to learn that, reflecting really quickly as well. You asked me off air earlier on if, do I feel guilty about taking breaks? Yes, I feel guilty about taking breaks, but I've had to learn the hard way that I do need to take care of myself because if I'm not well, I'm of no use to the business in particular or anyone else essentially. And learning that balance. I don't believe in the whole work-life balance thing. I think it's what you make of it for yourself. For me, I do what I need to do every day because I've made a commitment. People have made a commitment. Our clients have made a commitment to us, to me, to the vision. And so there are responsibilities that I have that maybe another person wouldn't necessarily have. And so I need to make sure that I understand what works for me and what doesn't. So definitely many lessons, but also, like I said, your character will be tested, but it's remaining steadfast in who you are, regardless of that. And I think I've done that pretty well.
It's very clear self-awareness is very important for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned how young you were when you guys took on this opportunity, and then fast forward 7 years later.
Yeah.
How were you learning and needing to adapt as quickly as possible to building something at the scale when you hadn't before? But more importantly, how important has mentorship been to help you be able to go into these roles, go into these rooms and navigate the way that you guys have?
I think over the years, there's many people that I've followed and you sort of looked at, how they run businesses, their work ethic, whether they're in the same industry or not. So that's the first thing. But I always go back to the fact that I learned a lot of lessons anyway from my mother. And so I always hold on to that, as a reminder, essentially, of, what does it mean when I do need to be resilient? What does it mean when I need to be persistent? Humility is an important one, because you need to know what you don't know and be okay with it so that you can learn, right? And that and there's been a lot of learning and unlearning over the years. And so for me, it's been very important to know that I don't know everything and that I do need support. Sometimes it's, professional support. Sometimes it's just support and somebody to unpack with and unpack to about what's happening on a day-to-day. But what's worked for me is just staying out of the crowd, if that makes sense. I said to you earlier, I don't really do a lot of interviews. My focus over the past 7 years is building the business and letting that be what speaks for me, to be honest with you. And for me not to say I'm doing so well. It must be clear from the platform that we are performing and that we are building a platform that we can be proud of. And so that has been something that's worked really well for me. Just focusing on the building and not having to PR anything or PR myself. There's no need for that. And so that was a key thing. And someone said that to me from the beginning when we won the bid, was like, just stay away from the noise. Just stay away from the noise and just focus on building. And I think that's worked really well for me, because in as much as sometimes the noise is people perhaps wanting to celebrate you or know more, it can also work against you, where people now feel like they want to infiltrate parts of you that you don't want infiltrated.
Yeah, because they think they have access.
They think they have access. And so it's essentially creating those boundaries and setting them and being steadfast in those boundaries and saying, this is where I draw the line. So I've been very clear on that and just focused on building. And I always say that, in the environment that we're in, especially because I started my career in many ways on air, be it radio or television, people do feel like they know you, but they know that version of you. If anyone worked with me, then they know that version of me. Yes, inherently I'm still the same person, but I've grown so much. And I'm in a different role now, and I have different responsibilities now. And so even how I move 100% has to change, and it certainly has in many ways.
What does it take in terms of the challenges that you guys have had to overcome to build, a media company that's focused on, being the voice of Africa for the future?
Some of the challenges, I guess, are, in the beginning, because you're trying to, and I'll start with Newzroom Afrika, because you're trying to build this big platform in such a short space of time, we had a lot of pressure. You had financial uncertainties because you essentially have to, build this huge setup ahead of the general elections, because that's when we launched. We launched ahead of the general elections in 2019. And so that was the first thing. The second thing was having all this noise around, are you worthy? Are you deserving? And having to block that out while trying to build. So I would say those are just some of the key challenges. But for me, like I said, the focus, I literally sat down and I said, this is not going to be the focus for me, because it's not going to do anything for me. Because there's not a single naysayer who has raised their hand to support. So why would I focus on a naysayer? The focus for me needs to be on building. And I think that's taking that challenge and turning it into an opportunity to say, how do I build? How do I do more? How do I get to a point where it's not about proving people wrong per se, but it's about making sure that you achieve the objectives that you've set out for yourself. So for me, those were the challenges in the beginning, but having blocked out the noise allowed for us to be able to focus on the task at hand. And the task at hand in 2019 was making sure that we launched successfully. And that's exactly what we achieved.
What does it look like to practically block out the noise? I think a lot of entrepreneurs say this, right? Like in a blanket statement, just say, there are things I need to do to protect myself mentally, emotionally, psychologically, so that the things that are external don't affect me. And I can focus on trying to build this business as persistently as possible. how do you protect yourself from, that noise that you're mentioning, but also still keep some level of like awareness about what's happening in the world?
So one thing I'm always being advised on is to, stay away from social media. So you don't see what's being said. But naturally, because of the line of work and the line of business that I'm in, you can't necessarily stay away. But you can disengage. So you don't engage. You don't give it any more airtime than it deserves, because you have a bigger platform usually anyway than the naysayers. And you set that boundary. That's the important thing. The second thing that's worked for me is having people around me that truly know me. And that's my family, and that's my small group of friends who've known me for most of my life. And I think that makes a difference, that when you're away from all of this, which is actually not your real life, you have people that truly know who you are, but who remind you who you are and whose you are. So for me, those are the two things that have truly worked for me, because it is easy for you to sort of drown in the noise. But when I say, when you ask, how do you practically block it out? It's through that. It's through disengaging, seeing it, but not internalizing it. And then also making sure that you're around people who truly know you.
And can remind you. And reinforce the right things about what you believe, who you are is.
Yeah.
You have a lot of startup lingo in how you speak. I'm noticing you say founder instead of a lot more than you say CEO.
Oh.
You said fail fast. And a couple other things, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of people have to have that mentality when you're going into a space with a lot of incumbents.
Yeah.
There's a lot of industry leaders, companies that have been doing this for decades and decades. You guys going into this as a new kid on the block, what does it take to compete on a new, complete vision when people feel like maybe they have it set on who they think is the right choice? And you are going, we have a new vision for what this should look like, how it should feel, how these stories need to be told.
I think the story that we told when selling the vision and when going through the bidding process was very compelling. And we came with the most innovative platform and proposal, essentially. And on the other hand, I guess what fed us well is that you had an entity in the form of DSTV and MultiChoice who was open to something new. Because that's the other thing. You need an enabler, right? And that enabler is the platform that is looking for a product, a new product, something that's never been done before, something that's never been seen before, and something that's groundbreaking. And so when you put those two together, that's essentially what made it work. Because you're right, a lot of the naysaying comes from the fact that people have never seen anything like it before. But more than that, they've never seen people like us before leading something like that. And so it's a double whammy in the sense that people are like, is this possible? There's no way. And I get it. And someone really close to me actually said it. They're like, no, the noise is because, well, we've never seen it. We've never seen young Black people, a woman owning anything like this before. And so it will take time for people to believe, which I'm like, that's fair. It must take time. But I think it's the being overcritical, from our own people, which is sometimes very disappointing. But I guess it comes with it, and there are certain things you have to accept that your purpose, because it's so high, or your calling is much higher, you will have a lot of things stacked up against you. But your job essentially is to make sure that you set that example and that you make it work, so that other people coming after you have it, I guess, a lot easier. Because I won't lie, it's definitely not easy to be constantly be told things about you that are actually not true.
Sure. When you think back at your journey, is there something that you're exceptionally proud about over the past 7 years? Just a proud moment. And this is the thing entrepreneurs like.
Yeah. Look, I don't know if it's I mean, I think there's been a lot of moments, but I think being able to build our own broadcast facility fully fledged was definitely one of those moments. That was a few years ago, I think 2021. So we acquired our building then, and being able to make it what it is today with, 2 fully fledged studios, our corporate office is there, our newsroom is there. So everything is there, our technical facilities are there. So that's definitely one of the proud moments. A second one is not a moment. I'm proud of the fact that I'm still here, that I'm still in it, that no matter how hard it's been, I still show up every single day for that place and for everyone there. Like nothing is happening, because that's my focus. The prize is the business for me. And I think the fact that I'm still there every single day for me makes me proud.
Yeah. You've described your vision as building the African media business of the future. What does that mean to you? And what does the future look like?
We've always had a Pan-African outlook. So we broadcast, as it stands right now, through Newzroom Afrika to 52 African countries. And so it's been very clear that we don't want to limit our content only to the SADC region. We want to speak to the territories that our platform exists in. So that's been the first thing. Beyond that, because we do have, through Ray Content Hub, our content creation business, and content production business there, it's about, creating content that speaks to that market, that speaks to the territories that we currently are in, and new spaces as well across different formats. And that's one thing we've been able to craft as a USP and as a niche for us, being able to create really compelling formats for different genres, particularly in the general entertainment space. And that's a space for us that has the biggest potential at the moment, outside of the continuous growth of the Newzroom Afrika platform. So for us, it's being able to build a business that can really compete at the highest level, toe to toe, which is why I say we truly run like a corporate. And the reason for that is because you don't want to be seen as just another small scale business. We've surpassed all of our objectives that we had set for ourselves in the first 5 years. So this next 5 years, we're now in the 6th year, is about making sure that we truly, solidify our vision, which we're constantly not reviewing, but we're constantly staying on top of it and saying, how can we do more? What are the new opportunities as well? Because yes, I'm the founder and I'm the CEO of this particular business, but at heart, I'm an entrepreneur. So I'm always looking for new opportunities and saying, what else can I build outside of this media, broadcasting and technology ecosystem that we've built? And, we've done so well in expanding, outside of platforms being the channels, as well as the content production, but also the technology space through Bluestream Technologies, which is my uplink and downlink business. So it's about saying, what are the opportunities that exist? And because you now have a track record, it becomes easier for you to converse differently. When you walk into a room with new opportunities, it becomes easier for you to be taken seriously, essentially.
Yeah, you're mentioning Bluestream Technologies, and this is one of other things that you're working on. How do you decide which ideas are worth pursuing?
I think for me, it has to make sense and align to my vision. And part of my vision is to say, where do my businesses belong? It's broadcasting, it's media, and it's technology. Because people always think of Newsroom as just media, right? But actually a big part of our capital expenditure goes to technology. We're essentially at a base level, a technology business before we are a media business. And so for me, I always look at that to say, does this fall within the realm of my vision? Which is media, broadcasting, and technology. And when it does, then I look at the other things, obviously. Does the business model work? What are the revenue models? Where are the other opportunities outside of this, the small scale one, if that's where we're starting? And then I build from there. So there has to be alignment. And for me, these 3 are the key sectors that I have chosen, including communication, I guess, holistically. And so, and Emerge falls under that. So all those entities have to make sense and align to my vision, so that you're not grasping at straws and taking any and every opportunity, because there's not enough of me to go around, right? And for the mere fact that I'm already running the operations as CEO, it does stretch me quite a lot, because you're still doing business development when it comes to starting the other businesses. But I think I've started enough businesses now to be able to say this opportunity makes sense, but I already have a model. There's like a template for me that I follow. And I think specifically with Ray Content Hub, with Emerge and Bluestream Technologies, I've for the most part stuck to the same template.
Yeah. So, you guys have gone from 2 employees at the beginning to 500 now. But you still care about purpose. You care about vision. You care about the mission that you have. How do you keep that purpose drive while you're still scaling?
The key thing is to set an example. And I think a lot of us forget about that. The people who are entrusted with basically executing your vision have to see you there, also putting in the work. They have to see you as well in the thick of things. And one thing I've been able to do over the past 7 years is exactly that. Setting that example, being visible. Leaders have to be visible. That's always my line. I'm always saying that to the team, that as leaders, it is important to be visible so that your team knows that you are there, that you are as invested as they are. Are the roles different? Is my role different to someone in my executive team, someone in my management committee? Of course. My role is different to everybody else in the organization. But at the same time, there's a certain touch point that I bring that nobody else can, which is why I always say that us being founder-run, some people see it as a negative, that you're too invested and you're too much in the thick of things. I see it as a positive, because I'm constantly in the thick of things and driving that vision and that mission and making sure that everybody is on board with it. But you're also able to pick up things that somebody else won't pick up, because your entire life is invested there, right? And so you have the entire skin in the game, essentially. And so having that skin in the game, I think, sets you apart. And so for me, that's how we've been able to sort of build the culture that we want to build. Yes, will you have instances where there's people who aren't aligned with the culture in the organization? You will, but they do fall away. Eventually, in fact, a lot of the time they see it for themselves, or the system just, identifies them and they fall out of it, because it is important to have people who truly believe in the vision and who want to play a part in growing what we're trying to grow here. Yeah.
So what does legacy mean to you? But also, what's the next frontier for the Rapid Innovation Group?
For me, legacy means creating a space where other people can thrive. And I already touched on this earlier on, where we have built an ecosystem where other entrepreneurs and other SMMEs are able to coexist with us, to create with us, and also build with us. So that's very important for me. And making sure that what we have currently gets to a point where not a single person is doubtful when the next young Black woman is afforded an opportunity like this. So it's those two things. The next frontier for the Rapid Innovation Group is definitely growth. I think we've pivoted so greatly. I founded specifically Rapid Innovation Group about 10 years ago. And, for me, this feels like a full circle moment now, it owning, Newzroom Afrika, Emerge, Ray Content Hub, and the rest of my businesses, including Bluestream Technologies. So it's about making sure that, those businesses become sustainable. And I think in many ways, Newzroom Afrika is already there. The group as a whole is already sustainable, but it's continuing to sustain that growth, because I think a lot of founders struggle with that. You get to a point where you just plateau, and the growth plateaus. So for me, it's making sure that we continue to perform at the highest levels consistently, as well as finding new opportunities to grow within the space that we're in. I know we're always warned about having, too many eggs in one basket. But at the same time, there's many opportunities in this basket that we're in, and the sector that we're in particular. And so it's about saying, how do we intentionally identify those opportunities to be able to aid the group to continue to grow in leaps and bounds. So for me, it's that growth. It's making sure we, meet and exceed our performance benchmarks. And that ultimately boils down to audiences, right? So regardless of what you're creating, you have to have the eyeballs. And that's really important for us. And then the third thing is making sure that we continue to build even outside of the ecosystem that we're in.
So let's fast forward 10 years from now. What does impact look like to you? But also, how do you guys measure it?
Well, impact is measured in many ways in our sector. As you know, essentially, if people are watching your channels, you're on the right track. Mm-hmm. But I think it's about more than that. It's about, are we educating people? Are we driving a message that is impactful and that is positive? Because a lot of news is bad news, as you know, because you're reporting factually. We're literally reporting what's happening on the ground. But I think it's finding ways to make it make sense for people, make them feel a part of it, which is why we consider ourselves the voice of the people on the Newzroom Afrika side. So for me, I think if we can continue on that trajectory and make it more interactive and more engaging for our viewers, that's very important. Adding more platforms, I think will also show that impact. It'll show that our platforms work and they perform, and so it makes sense for the broadcaster to commission our platforms. Hopefully adding more languages to our vernacular bulletins, because we do have another base on the side of Nguni News, which sits on the Mzansi channels. And we would want to increase the number of languages that we cover there. Right now, we cover only the Nguni News, the Nguni languages, which is isiXhosa and isiZulu. So we'd like to see if there's potential to add more languages there. Because, like I said, part of being the voice of the people is being inclusive, even when it comes to language. And so that's a key one for us. And then the last one, I think for me, it's now looking at how do we get our platforms into other territories. That's now beyond Africa. And we are looking at new territories. And so saying, where are the opportunities for us to be able to build our platforms and introduce our platforms? And the rest, I will not say now, but I always say that the most important thing for me is for my work to speak for me. And I think in 10 years, that's exactly what will be happening.
So the internet has given us the amazing gift of hundreds and thousands of people trying to build media companies from their phones, from their DIY cameras, their microphones. What's a piece of advice you'd give to the next generation of people who want to work in media, who want to tell great stories, make great content, and build sustainable businesses from it?
I think I mentioned this earlier on, and I said that sometimes people view the media, or be it content creation, as very casual industries, right? Casual spaces. And for me, the advice that I would give is keep it professional. If you want to be taken seriously, take yourself seriously as well. Whether or not you're creating content with your phone or in a fully fledged professional studio, it is important for you to be taken in the light that you want to be received in. And that can only happen through that professionalism, and making sure that you're driving a clear message and a clear vision. Yes, we are told, just start. But start with a plan. I think it is important to have some sort of plan so that it guides you in the process of building. So for me, that's what I would say. Whatever it is that you're doing, make sure that you are creating and building in such a way that you can be taken seriously, because, one door leads to another.
What is one piece of advice or one thing that you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning of your journey?
Not everyone is going to be happy for you, and that's okay.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, but also just sharing your journey in this way. I think purpose is such a clear and important thing for you, but also impact as well. And I think that we need more entrepreneurs who focus on those two things, but also, follow through by making sure that they can add some value to the people that are coming after that. And yeah, I can't wait to see what you keep on building.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It's been a long time coming.
I really appreciate it. I'm happy that I was the one that you were willing to do this.
Yeah. First and last podcast until I have my own.
I can't wait for yours then. I can't wait for yours.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.